Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Tuesday, which means it's time for our weekly tier list. And considering we still have a long way to go until the season, until I start making my official predictions, I thought I would do a tier list on every single team's expectations coming into the season, whether they're straight up cup or bust, whether they're hoping to finally make the playoffs like the Ottawa Senators for the last 3 seasons, if they want to take a serious step out of the basement of the league like the Chicago Blackhawks. We would tier list them right now. So we have 5 different tier list, cup or bust, win a round or two, basically safely make the playoffs, and then maybe go on a little bit of a run, make the playoffs, take a serious step out of the bottom. And then the last one's kind of like little to none. You really don't have that much expectations in terms of where your team's going to be next season. So without further ado, let's get into it. Up first, we got the Dallas Stars, and they're pretty obviously in cup or bust. Even though they still have like a large window ahead, it's probably going to be like another 6 or 7 years of them competing at a very high level. You make back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and you're going to be in cup or bust, especially considering there weren't fluky runs to the Western Conference Finals. They have been a top tier. They were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference last year. So at this point, it's fully cup or bust. They need to make a Stanley Cup final and probably win a cup final in the next 2 to 3 years with the team that they have overall. Nashville Predators, I think you could argue cup or bust just because their core is so old. Steven Stamkos, 34, Marchessault, 34, Roman Josi, 34, 35 as well. I'm going to put them in a win a round or two. I think if they make the playoffs this year, then like if they make the playoffs and win a game, win a round or win a round or two, I think the following year would be more so cup or bust, but I don't think that like they're on a 1-year timeline. I think they're going to have 2 to 3 years of competing at a high level until age really starts getting up there with this core. Maybe you could put them in cup or bust, but I'm just going to put them in a win a round or two. Buffalo Sabres make the playoffs, especially after not this season, but the previous season, just barely missing out. They take a massive step back this year with 81 points. They got to make the playoffs at some point with this core. I'm still bullish on their future going forward, but next year should be definitely make the playoffs or it's an absolute failure of a season, and Kevin Adams is probably getting fired. The Calgary Flames, they're like the definition of little to none, considering they're just now entering their rebuild. They haven't had a truly horrible season. Last year, they had 81 points, but this year should be the first year where they like absolutely suck. They're bottoming out right now. Well, really last year they bottomed out in terms of trading a lot of pieces, but this year it's not going to be pretty, and as a result, they have basically no expectations. Montreal Canadiens, take a serious step, get out of the 70s, put up around 80-ish points. They didn't do enough this offseason to actually be, I'd say, and make the playoffs. I think that they are behind some teams in the Atlantic Division in terms of battling for a playoff spot, but take a serious step. Don't be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Don't be bottom 5 in the NHL. Be around the 8th to 11th worst team in hockey. I think that would be a pretty solid step for Montreal, and it would give Kent Hughes the confidence to be more aggressive next season in terms of their window really opening up in 2026, 2027 in terms of making the playoffs and then contending a little bit later on. Los Angeles Kings, it's tough because like at this point it should be win a round or two. I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs, but I think anything less, if they make the playoffs and lose in the first round, that's kind of a failure of a season. I'm not going to lie at this point, considering they've gotten L'd 3 straight years. Yes, they do have some young, exciting pieces like Quinton Byfield, like Brandt Clarke, but the time is now. You got to ride it out until Kopitar and Doughty start to actually regress, and they really haven't the last 3 to 4 years. So as a result, they got to win. They got to win a round or two. If they make the playoffs and lose in the first round, that is an abject failure of the season for the LA Kings. Ottawa Senators, same as the Buffalo Sabres. You got to make the playoffs. They took a step back this season. They dealt with some injuries, the coaching, the ownership changing. It wasn't ideal last year, but this season, new ownership, new general manager, new coach. Everything is fresh. Make the goddamn playoffs. Get out of the rebuild that has been going on for the past like 7 goddamn years. Get it done. Winnipeg Jets, I'm going to go with win a round or two. Not sure they're going to be as strong as they were last year with 110 points, but definitely the expectation coming off a season where they were so strong in the regular season but got their ass kicked in the first round. I don't think cup or bust, but if they win, or if they somehow beat a Colorado Avalanche, beat a Dallas Stars in the first round, I think that would be a solid season for them. But their core is starting to get up there in age. They got to start making a serious dent come playoff time. St. Louis Blues, I don't really know where to put them because I don't think they really did enough this season to make... The expectation probably is to make the playoffs, but they're just in such a weird spot. I'm going to put them in make the playoffs, considering they were the best non-playoff team in the NHL last year. But yeah, they're just in a pretty weird spot, in my opinion. Florida Panthers, it kind of is cup or bust for them still, even though I agree that if they make an Eastern Conference Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, that's not an object failure. I guess I'm going to bump them down to win a round or two. They are a lot more shallow of a team this season. So if they make the Eastern Conference Finals or the second round, I don't think Florida Panthers fans would be like, God damn it, after making a Stanley Cup final in 2023 and winning the Cup in 2024. Although I think their talent level is definitely cup or bust. San Jose Sharks, little to none. They're still pretty easily the worst team in the NHL. Although they did a lot this offseason, Chicago did even more. They were a 47-point team last year. So when looking at them, I still think they're probably going to be the worst team in the NHL. They should be better than 47 points, but actually take a serious step outside of the bottom three in the NHL. I just don't see it happening, and especially with guys like James Higgins, Anton Frandel, Porter Martone, if you're a San Jose Sharks general manager or just an overall fan, you probably want them to suck for another season and get another high draft pick and just be absolutely set for the future. So they really have no expectations. Columbus, definitely take a serious step. They've been bottom 5 in the NHL the last 2 seasons. So when looking at them, they're not going to make the playoffs next year in a pretty competitive Eastern Conference, but I think taking that step to like high 70s would be a solid season for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And as a result, I got them and take a serious step. My New York Islanders, I might be delusional, but making the playoffs is not enough with this core. When looking at what they did in 2020, when looking at what they did in 2021, making the conference finals or the semifinal, NHL semifinal back in 2021, when looking at it, their core is not young. And they go out, they get a guy like Anthony Duclair that I think is a good ad. I'm not saying they're going to win a round or two, but at this point, considering they have made it back to the playoffs the past 2 years with the full season of Patrick Waugh at the helm, they got to win a round, in my opinion, for it to be a successful season. Edmonton Oilers, after the offseason that they had, especially the added pressure of getting Stan Bowman, now everybody doesn't like them. They have even more pressure on them. Got Skinner, got Arvidsson, almost pulled off the 3-0 comeback. It's cup or bust. They are the definition of cup or bust. They have the most pressure on them this season to win the Stanley Cup, considering Bouchard and Draisaitl are entering the final year of their deal. Connor McDavid only has 2 years. Cup or bust by definition. Colorado Avalanche, I'm going to go with cup or bust as well. When looking at it, the last 2 playoff runs have been extremely disappointing. Yes, they have dealt with stuff like Landeskog being hurt, Nichushkin having his own personal demons to fight. So when looking at the Colorado Avalanche, the cup is 3 seasons ago at this point. So I think that they are back in cup or bust. They need to be a highly competitive team, and losing to the Dallas Stars in the second round would be a failure of a season. Maybe making back to the Western Conference Finals would be okay, but I think Colorado, they want to get that second Stanley Cup and really have a chance at turning into a dynasty. I think it's time for them to get back in the picture. Pittsburgh, they should make the playoffs, I guess, but they also have, I see no one hyping up this Pittsburgh team. Again, it's tough because they're obviously going to be better than these teams, but I think that they don't have that many expectations coming into the season. I feel like they're kind of entering this retool, rebuild. So I'm going to put them down there. I know people are going to read that as I'm saying that they're going to be worse than the Canadiens or the Columbus, but it's more so just like whatever happens with the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. Nobody is that high on them. New Jersey Devils, this might be crazy, but I'm going to put them in cup or bust when looking at it. I think... No, that might be a little bit ridiculous. No, screw that. After all they did this offseason, after trading for a 34-year-old in Jacob Markstrom, I think making an Eastern Conference Finals, maybe making a Stanley Cup Finals, this should be like cup or cup final or bust. But when looking at New Jersey, after all the ads that they made, I still think that they are way closer to the team that they were in 2023 than 2024. So as a result, I think they need to go on a deep playoff run, and including making a Stanley Cup Final is what I would deem successful for the New Jersey Devils. Even though they missed the playoffs last year with 81 points, I think they have a lot of pressure on them to show that they are legit and not the team that they were in 2024. Vegas Golden Knights, it's tough. Last year, they did go so aggressive at the deadline. I'm gonna go with win a round or two. Won the Cup in 2023, so I don't think the fans are fully pissed off after last season being like, we need to win a goddamn Stanley Cup, get that second one quite yet. But when looking at it, they're the Vegas Golden Knights. Their core is not young by any stretch, so I think it's definitely win a round or two. Utah, take a serious step when looking at Utah. They were pretty bad last year, especially after that 14-game losing streak. So I think that they could be battling for a Western Conference wildcard spot. I think that's the expectation, honestly. Get between, I think anything under 85 points next year. Andre Tourney's probably getting fired. Armstrong's going to be on the hot seat because they did a lot this offseason in terms of going out and getting guys like Sergachev and John Marino. So they need to take a serious step this year. Carolina Hurricanes definitely win a round or two after how aggressive they were and what they lost in the offseason. Not sure that they're cup or bust right now. I feel like they're kind of in a retool year. They're going to try out some of their young guys coming over, and they still got Nicky Shin coming over the year after. So as a result, although they do have the pedigree the last 3 to 4 years to maybe be in a cup or bust, I think next year is a little bit of a retool, similar to with the Boston Bruins heading into last season. Definitely should still make the playoffs. The expectation should be to win a round or two, but not cup or bust anymore. New York Rangers, definitely cup or bust when looking at the ages of most of their forward core. Panarin's 32. Kreider is also in his early 30s. Zibanejad and Trocheck as well. Yes, they do have Lafreniere, but they need to start going. They need to make a cup final and win a cup final when looking at them. 2 Eastern Conference finals in the last 3 years. Detroit make the playoffs, especially after last year. They collapsed a little bit in the back half or the back third of the season. Make the playoffs, especially with the way that they spent or the interesting moves that they made this summer in terms of dumping Jake Wallman with the second-round pick in order to bring in a guy like Tarasenko, as well as re-signing Patrick Kane. They got to make the playoffs or else the eyes are playing. We don't know where exactly that is trending. Vancouver Canucks. This might be a little bit bold, but I think I'm going to go. I like that the offseason that they did have. I like that they didn't decide to overpay Zadorov and Lindholm. I'm going to go with cup or bust. And again, at this point, I think it's more so cup final or bust. So when looking at them, they should be highly competitive yet again. And as a result, I'm going to put them in cup or bust. I know I have a decent amount of teams in cup or bust, but I feel like it's going to be a very high-pressure season this year in the NHL. Minnesota Wild make the playoffs, get back to the playoffs. Then the following season, once they get that $12 to $13 million back with the Suter and Parise buyouts, then they move up to win a round or two. But next year, still with having like $13, $14 million in dead cap, just make the playoffs, get back in the playoffs and be competitive, especially with the full season of John Hines, and hopefully that goalie tandem can bounce back. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm going to go with win a round or two. I know some people are so high on this team, but when looking at them, I feel like this year, there's not a ton of pressure. Last year of Mitch Marner and John Tavares, there could actually be change the following offseason in terms of moving off some guys. So I feel like next season, I don't know. I don't really have them quite in cup or bust. Chicago Blackhawks, the way that they spent, they are for sure and take a serious step. I don't know if they're going to get out of the bottom 3 or bottom 5 in the NHL, but I think they're definitely going to improve off a 52-point season. I think they're going to be at least in the mid-60s, and that should be the goal surrounding Bedard and actually playing some competitive hockey instead of getting your teeth kicked in basically every night like last year. Boston Bruins, cup or bust. I know. Considering the fact that last year they didn't have that much of expectations because they had some dead money carrying over in bonuses. But this year, extremely aggressive, bringing some big guys through free agency like Zadorov and Lindholm. It is fully cup or bust, especially after dumping Linus Ullmark, getting a pretty disappointing return. They got a lot of pressure on them. They got to make it work, and they got to win a goddamn Stanley Cup. The Anaheim Ducks take a serious step. Last year was very disappointing for that team that ended up with the 3rd overall selection. This year, they got to be around the 70-ish point mark, mid-70s in my opinion. They got to take a serious step. Philadelphia Flyers, I feel like they're similar to the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they can go a shit ton of different directions. I think they easily could be a bottom 8 team. So I don't think that they have that much expectations. They're in this weird like tweener phase. They just want to see Michkov be good. But I feel like with their goalie tandem and defense score, they're not going to be that good. So I don't think that they have that much expectations. Washington Capitals, you can maybe put them in win a round or two. I'm going to put them in make the playoffs right now, but if they get off to a hot start, definitely the expectations will change. After the way that they spent this offseason, I could definitely understand if you have them in win a round or two. Tampa Bay Lightning, definitely win a round or two after deciding to tell their captain basically to get out of here. I don't know what kind of saying I was going for there. Kick rocks. Steven Stamkos, they decided to bring in Jake Gensel. This team should be highly competitive as long as Andrei Vasilevsky has a decent bounce-back season. And then the Seattle Kraken make the playoffs after having 100 points, going down to 81, spending a decent amount of money through Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour. They got to get back in the playoff picture or else Ron Francis's seat is going to get very hot, and honestly, rightfully so. But here is the full tier list. I'm not blocking off anybody. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about it? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'll be seeing you in the next one.